Well, welcome back to Focus Today. And, this election season, we're seeing a lot of tie-ins with social action and prosperity and where money should go and where it shouldn't be. So you expect that during an election season, but it's actually a concern that happens outside of just every 4 years for a presidential election, for example. Scott Moody is an economist with the American Conservative Union Foundation. And along with his wife, they've established something that's interesting. It's called the Family Prosperity Index. And we're going to be delving into what this is all about and what it has shown. Give an idea. Scott, good to have you with us. What is this index about? Why did you establish this, and what's it for?
Well, thank you for having me. My wife and I are professional economists, and we've been looking at policy and economics for almost 20 years. And as we did look at these policies, we felt like we had one arm tied behind our back. We knew in our own personal situation, for example, we've watched family fragmentation, for example, and we've seen the economic consequences that has on families. And we knew that social factors also played a very important role in economic prosperity. And so we came up with the idea of the Family Prosperity Index so that we could look at the whole person, both the economic side of the equation as well as the social side, and put the two together. And we believe that gives us a much better picture in terms of moving forward, in terms of policy that will help the family.
All right, what are some of the factors that you analyzed to put together this index?
Well, let's look at one statistic that's out there that everybody knows, gross domestic product, right? What is GDP, though, at the end of the day? It's this amorphous aggregate that sums up all economic activity in the United States. But what does that mean to a family? It really doesn't mean a whole lot. The family is the core institution in society. It's where, the growth of children happen, where economic production happens. And so the Family Prosperity Index is going to take that holistic picture and put it front and center.
All right, so what you're doing is you're looking at how various economic factors impact individual families in different states. Is that a good summary?
Well, that's right. Like GDP, every state is going to get a score in the Family Prosperity Index, which consists of 6 major indexes made up of over 57 variables. So it's very comprehensive. And that's one of the major goals, is to give this wide picture of the family. And so with that score, we can tell which states are doing better in terms of creating family prosperity and which ones aren't.
And of course that leads us into, I do want to know how Oregon did, but before that, if we could just back up just slightly, if the GDP is too broad and big to look at, what did you look at to say, okay, this impacts the family, so we're going to analyze this section? What kind of categories of data did you look at?
Well, the Family Prosperity Index is all built off of credible government data and published analysis. So it's made up of 6 major indexes ranging from economics, demographics, family structure, family self-sufficiency, family culture, and family health. And those 6 factors have shown to be the most interconnected in terms of determining family prosperity by state.
So by what you've analyzed, what is it that you can determine? What states are doing best for families or not in general?
Well, once we put all the data together, it was really fascinating because Utah is the #1 state in the Family Prosperity Index. And what's fascinating about that is, as we know, Utah, the Mormon religion is very, very strong there, and they put a large emphasis on families. And when you look at it, Utah's not just #1 in 1 or 2 of those major indexes. They're #1 in 5 of them, and #2 in the one that they're not #1. So Utah is the telltale state, if you will, of the importance of the family in terms of generating overall economic prosperity.
Okay, where did Oregon rank?
Well, unfortunately, Oregon ranks much lower and comes in at number 35. And the primary reason for that is poor economic performance and poor family health, particularly in regards to illicit drug use, which actually could be tied together because a poor economy oftentimes leads to higher drug use.
Okay, let's juxtapose, if we could, then Utah with Oregon. What is it that they are doing right in the categories where they rank number one and we aren't? You mentioned the one. What about some of the others?
Well, I think that's the fascinating juxtaposition between a state like Utah and other states is the emphasis on family, and not just in terms of policy, but really in terms of culture. The reinforcing nature of families becomes a virtuous cycle, if you will. However, when you have factors like illicit drug use or a poor economy that fragments families, that can become a vicious cycle and one that needs to be broken quickly.
Okay, so what were some of the other categories? You looked at illicit drug use, probably, I imagine, overall income for a family of four or something like that, as well as maybe crime rates. I mean, are those some of the factors you looked at? Give us an idea of the broad picture.
Absolutely. We look at crime rate, religious attendance. We look at family structure, so the number of marriages, the number of divorces, the percent of children that live in intact families. Because let's not forget, when we talk about the family, we're not just talking about adults, we're also talking about children. And raising those children to become productive adults is not easy business. If everybody who's had children knows that. And so what we're talking about, and this is why these phenomena can play out over years and over decades. I mean, right now, the United States is looking at demographic winter, where there are too few young people coming up, generations coming up to replace the baby boomers, and that's going to have profound economic consequences as we move forward.
Does an improved or a better rating, like you mentioned Utah have, also mean that fewer state services are needed through taxpayer money if the family is intact? Is that too broad a generalization, or is that accurate?
No, that's very accurate. In fact, we're releasing the Family Prosperity Index within the next week, but the ongoing research is going to connect these factors as you're talking about. And so we'll be able to tell you how welfare, for example, impacts family structure. It's long been known. In fact, the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan warned us about this almost 40 years ago, that in regards to the black family, that the disintegration of the black family would in turn lead to more welfare dependency and make it harder for them to break into the American dream. And I think what the Family Prosperity Index is showing is exactly that.
Now, how do you hope that lawmakers will use this? And do you think, first of all, do you think they will? Are they going to pay much attention to this, do you think?
I think if you're serious about economic prosperity, you need to look at social well-being as well. You can't look at one in a vacuum. And so policymakers who are serious about benefiting the families in their state are going to have to take the Family Prosperity Index seriously, because as we've seen, states like Utah and others that are doing it currently, focusing on the family, they are in fact doing better all the way around.
Okay, you mentioned Oregon was 30-something, 30 what in the ranking?
35.
35, and Utah number one. How big of a huge change would have to take place within a state structure to improve in some of the areas that you've identified, the 6 key factors? Is this a huge change for some states? Would they have to really rethink how they are focusing their attention on their own state?
Well, that's going to be the great thing about the Family Prosperity Index, is as we build these relationships between variables. Right now, there are 30 sub-indexes that go into all this, so each one's only worth about 3.3%. So if you boost your marriage rate, you're only going to affect the score of about 3.3% of the index. However, we know through published sources that marriage rates are going to affect the family structure. They're going to affect economic growth and reduce welfare spending. So it's going to filter through the index and thereby raise the score overall much more profoundly than influencing any one factor.
Can states take this and really do much with it if in fact it has to do with divorce rates? I'm not sure, what you'd even want them to do in that area. Is there anything that they can really do to implement some of the changes that you might be suggesting?
Well, one of the things we've learned doing, policy work, my wife and I, is that we too often focus on what policymakers can, in fact, accomplish. And the great thing about the Family Prosperity Index is it's going to involve many people in terms of fixing the problems the state faces, from civic leaders to religious leaders to citizen activists. They're all going to have a role in impacting the culture of the state and making and putting a greater emphasis on the family. So I don't want to overplay. Policymakers can do a lot, obviously, but they're not the end all and be all.
So how are you going to get all this information out to all of these people that you're talking about? How are you going to make that contact?
Well, we're going to be releasing the study at CPAC next week, which of course is a great way to release this study. We have a website, familyprosperity.org, and related social media. And of course, we're going to be going into the states moving forward. We're going to be generating customized state-by-state reports. I hope we can do Oregon soon. And we're really going to do a deep dive into what the Family Prosperity Index has to say about your state.
All right. Well, that sounds interesting. So can people find the actual results, the extensive detail, or is it a summary at your website, familyprosperity.org?
No, in fact, the website has a web app that will allow you to dive into every part of the Family Prosperity Index, because we want people to be able to understand where their state ranks and why.
Well, this will be interesting to see how, now that you've got the data out, and how long did this take for you to amass all of this?
Well, the data collecting alone took almost a year, but the idea has taken us an entire career.
Wow. Well, it'll be fascinating to see what actually results from this once the data is out there, because I'm sure that you're looking at it saying, well, we've got the data here, but now something has to, it's more than just publishing it, it has to have some action component to it. So you'll be probably talking to a lot of people at CPAC, I suppose, about that.
That's right. And that's the exciting thing, is the coalitions will be able to build with the Family Prosperity Index, both on the economic and social side, and putting them together. I think it's going to be a powerful force for change in the states.
Do you think that mostly, only from what I can tell, conservatives are going to really be targeting looking at this? I mean, do you expect to hear from the liberal element also, or do you think they're going to just discount this?
No, absolutely. The great thing about the literature on the importance of family today is both on the left and right are coming to the same conclusions. And that's what's exciting about this. And so what the Family Prosperity Index is doing for the first time is putting all of this data into an easy-to-use format, a single number that both the left and right can use to talk about this important issue.
All right. Scott Moody is an economist with the American Conservative Union Foundation. You'll be issuing this in a week or so, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. If you want to find out more, you can go to their website, familyprosperity.org. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Speaking of kind of moving into a similar vein, dealing with politics specifically, we're going to get a legislative update on what's happening with the Oregon legislature coming up in just a couple minutes right here on Focus Today.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.